Good afternoon, my friends. This is Paul, and today I'm going to be reviewing to you Princess Peach Showtime for the Nintendo Switch. This is the first time Peach has gotten her own game since 2006's Super Princess Peach. But whereas that game felt more like a Mario platformer with Peach elements, this feels like a Peach game through and through. It tries its absolute best to make sure that it stands alone on its own, and if hypothetically you had never heard of the Mario games, you would still be able to enjoy Showtime. The only other remnant of the Mushroom Kingdom to be found here are a couple of Toads, but there's only like 2 of them, and they only appear at the very start and the very end, which I think was a deliberate choice because I think Nintendo's finally starting to realize enough is enough with Toads. Keep it to the bare minimum. Super Paper Mario had only 1 Toad the whole game. Let's keep it close to that number. The premise of Princess Peach Showtime is that the entire game takes place at the Sparkle Theater. So you'll go into various plays, and it'll be your job to bring the plays back to how they were supposed to be before the new villain Grape and her gang the Sour Bunch tried to mess up the play. Now the plays are typically split into 2 acts. The first one, you just play as Peach in her normal pink dress, and she uses the power of sparkles to affect that which is around her. So you'll typically shoot out beams of energy, think like the yarn attacks that Kirby used in Kirby's Epic Yarn, and you can use these in a forward attack, a neutral spin attack, and even a neutral aerial attack. And if there are enemies or objects around you, then they'll either be destroyed or restored. So for example, you might see a little tree, and if you use Sparkler on the tree, then it'll become a big tree. Or if you see an enemy, you can knock it out. You can also use the power of Sparkle to encourage the characters in this game, which are called Feats, and you can get them to pluck up the courage to do whatever needs to be done, because typically the Sour Bunch ruining the play saps their morale, so you can bring them back to their original roles. So I suppose you could say the genre at this point in the level is more of a slight platformer. You'll jump a few times, but more often than not, it's more so of moving from left to right in a 2.5D perspective. And this is both a hit or a miss. On one hand, it makes it easy to follow along with the level, but on the other hand, sometimes the depth perception can be a bit off, and the control stick isn't always the most responsive to which direction you want to go in. Similarly, one little nitpick people might have is that there's only 1 speed Peach can move at. There's no tiptoeing or walking, it's just flat out running, and that's it. But I think that was done to avoid making the game too complicated, because this is very much aimed toward younger players, but we'll get to that in a bit. For now, let's move on to the second act. Every play has a podium that has sparkles on it, and when you stand on that, Peach does a cool little transformation, and then she'll get into a new costume which completely changes the game's approach. So for example, in the first level, she'll transform into a sword fighter, where you'll do a bunch of really cool slashing maneuvers to attack the enemies and thorns around you. And if you attack or jump at just the right time, you can even dodge your opponent's attacks and jump straight to their weaknesses. But then the very next stage, you could be making cookies, and you'll have to rapidly press buttons and stop at just the right time to get the right score, or decorate cakes by attempting to get the icing in the correct formation according to the picture that's shown on the upper right side of the screen. None of these transformations were terrible. Every single one of them was amazing to see, and I loved the variety at display here. I know some people on the internet complained that this game was directionless, but personally, I don't really care. If that's the case, I love the fact that the game just keeps on reinventing its genre, and even when some of the costumes can have ideas that are similar, they have just enough differences in aesthetic and controls to make it work. So for example, you might say that there are quite a lot of costumes that involve beating up a lot of enemies. But there's more to the game than just beating them up. There are also platforming sections. Sometimes Peach will be in sections where she's moving on rails, and you'll have to just manage to jump and do actions. And the set pieces are overall very entertaining. There's not really a bad part of any part of the game. It's really just all high quality all the way through. Generally speaking, quality is the word that I would use to describe this game in general. It was made by Goodfeel, which are the developers behind Yoshi's Woolly World and Kirby's Epic Yarn, and it really shows. They typically have a theme that they go for in each game that they have, and usually the theme is related to something involving arts and crafts. So the theme here is theater, so everything has a very artificial look, but the game knows that. Like, it's self-aware enough to realize that it's a play, and will even say that we must save the play right there in the script, and that helps it to feel like it has direction. See? It's not directionless. It knows that it's a play and embraces it. The graphics aren't mind-blowing except during the cutscenes, but I feel like the play aesthetic is mainly responsible for that, just because I like things to look more realistic, and obviously the game is going for something that, say, someone would craft, as opposed to something that would look natural. So I'm just not the biggest fan of that kind of look, but I can't fault the game for that because that's the point. It's supposed to look like a low quality play, especially because Grape and the Sour Bunch are ruining it. As far as everything else, I really liked the music in this game. Pretty much every track was performed with real instruments, and even the ones that weren't made sense. Like, situationally, it probably would have ruined the atmosphere. There were even a few pieces where I could have sworn that they might have sampled music from an actual symphony that wasn't the game. That's how high quality it was. It's pretty typical for Goodfeel to go above and beyond to provide real instruments in franchises that otherwise wouldn't. Take a look at the real instruments used in Kirby's Epic Yarn compared to the MIDI stuff that the mainline Kirby series uses, or the abundance of guitar tracks in Yoshi's Woolly World. And they do a great job of bringing that over here. They even have an in-game soundtrack player so that you can listen to all the songs as much as you want. And of course, I love whenever games have a soundtrack, but especially if the soundtrack is good. I like how there's a label on the record that's playing in the soundtrack player that tells you what play it's from. So when I'm gathering background music for this review, that's going to be really helpful of knowing which song goes with which part of the game. The controls are designed to be as simple as possible so that you're not overwhelmed by too many decisions. So you jump, you use sparkle, and then eventually you use the abilities of the costumes, and the only other button you'll use is to strike a pose with one of the shoulder buttons if you get into an interesting looking area that might have some sparkles or looks out of place. And then you'll go to a background area where sometimes it's just full of coins, but occasionally there will be some light platforming. Some of these are completely optional even for completionists, as all they'll have are coins, but every now and then you'll find a sparkle gem. Speaking of which, the three main collectibles in this game are ribbons, sparkle gems, and coins. You use the coins to buy more outfits for Peach and her companion Stella at the shop. And all of these are optional, but man do I love it when games let me change my outfit, especially when that's part of the game's design. The sparkle gems are used to unlock the grape doors that appear after you've cleared every play on a particular floor of the theater, so essentially consider them like the stars in Super Mario 64. And then finally we have the ribbons, which unlock even more costumes for Stella than what you already have in the shop. One thing that annoys me a little bit about collecting the sparkle gems is that while most of them are pretty easy to find, some of them require you to go off the beaten path or think outside the box. But in typical linear platforming styles that I've noticed in other games like Kirby and the Forgotten Land and Super Mario 3D World, after you've gotten past a particular scripted section, you cannot go back even if you should. So for example, you might transition to the next scene, and even though you could potentially walk the other direction, the game just doesn't want you to. There's not really an option to rewind or try again besides restarting from the very beginning. So if you miss a couple, you have to start the whole play over again, which I think is just stupid. I wish there was more of a, I guess, any kind of little checklist. Like in the Ace Attorney games, for example, they might say, hey, there's still more to investigate around here. So something along those lines to make it so that I don't go to the next area and then have to restart the play. Generally speaking, the difficulty is very much aimed toward younger players. And I'm not the type of guy that'll say it's a Mario game, so therefore it's kids. Have you not played Super Mario Bros. The Lost Levels? I certainly wouldn't call that a game for kids. But this is absolutely geared more towards people who just want to have a fun time without too much challenge. It's pretty hard to get a game over, and even if you do run out of hearts, all you lose are a couple of coins, which, since coins are only used to buy cosmetics, it's not too harsh of a punishment, but if you're like me where you like gathering different outfits, it can feel like a bit of a sting. But I'm of the mindset that just because a game is easy doesn't mean that it's bad. Take a look at Kirby's Epic Yarn that I keep bringing up. In that game, you didn't even have a health bar, but pretty much everyone I've talked to has said that they love Epic Yarn, and some people even call it their favorite Kirby game. And in this case, I love this game so much because the set pieces, literally, and the moment-to-moment gameplay is so consistently good that even if it's easy, there was not a single moment in the game when I was not having fun. And I think that's what matters ultimately for me, is if the fun factor is there, then whether it's easy or hard, what matters is that I'm enjoying myself. Basically, at this point, any criticisms I have about Princess Peach Showtime are just going to be tiny little nitpicks. I do think that sometimes the game has the same problem as Super Mario 3D World, where the fixed camera perspective can sometimes affect the platforming and my attacks. Like, I might want Peach to attack in a bottom right formation, but then she attacks just to the right, and there's not a whole lot of precision. Sometimes I might miss a jump that I would otherwise make in a Mario game, but these are pretty few and far between. It didn't affect my enjoyment too much, and usually on the second or third try I would get it right. So the difficulty is fair. Like, there are definitely parts of the game where you have challenge. For example, there are what's called rehearsals, where you just go through a specific part of the stage and try to complete the objective. So for instance, you might want to defeat as many enemies as possible without getting hit, or you might go through a stealth section. And these are a cool way to get extra coins and rewards while not being strictly necessary to beat the game. They just let you get the rewards quicker. Sometimes the cutscenes can slow down a little bit, but really, I don't think it's as big of a deal as the internet made it out to be when they played the demo. I only noticed that it slowed down a bit after I would beat the play and some of the energy would be transferred over to the area where the grape door would appear. Otherwise, I didn't really notice the game being too sluggish or low resolution. Maybe it's just because I'm easy to please and I just don't pay attention to resolution and stuff like that. Yes, it's not mind-blowing in the graphics department, but it's not trying to be. It's a theater, so of course it's going to have a bit of an artificial look. But overall, I like the designs of Peach quite a lot. I think they did a good job of making her seem cute without making her seem sexual. Like, you all know that I love non-sexual, non-lustful body positivity. And even if Peach was showing some skin, it never felt to the level of sexualization. It felt like they said, let's make an adorable protagonist and leave it at that. Let's not try to use the fact that she's female as a way of getting attention or getting more sales. And I really like that restraint that they showed, as I didn't think a single costume was ugly or terrible. Every single one of them was so adorable that I kept capturing photos with my Switch's capture feature. And that's a sign of a good game, when the whole quality is consistent. Obviously, there were costumes I liked more than others. I don't want to spoil all of them, but there was one particular costume where you actually had to use your brain a lot, and of course, as an Ace Attorney fan, I love that. However, one problem I had with the costumes is that if you've watched all of the trailers for Princess Peach Showtime, you've seen pretty much every costume in the game. There is a nice little surprise in the final battle that I don't want to spoil for you, but otherwise, Nintendo kinda spoiled their own game quite a lot. So if you haven't watched the trailers, don't, as there is a certain amount of joy that was taken from me since I did watch the trailers thinking, oh, they're just gonna show a couple of the costumes. It's no big deal. Yeah, that kind of soured the experience for me. I get it, like, Nintendo wants to make sure that the aesthetic appeal is going to sell people when the difficulty isn't, but even just a little bit of surprise would have been nice here. Still, Princess Peach Showtime is a consistently engaging time. It is a bit on the easier side, so definitely more towards younger players, but it's still so much fun. I love the variety that the different outfits offer Peach. All of them control nice and simple, so it's pretty easy to pick up and play the controls. I love the replay value of it, as the post-game gives you other stuff to do, which I feel is great because it doesn't feel like you're missing out on too much if you don't do it. So that's the perfect kind of post-game, where it's cool to have extra stuff, but it doesn't feel like you're missing out if you decide to just call it after rolling the credits. I recommend Princess Peach Showtime to anyone who just loves aesthetically pleasing outfits and wants some gameplay variety. Maybe if you're an older gamer that's looking for a challenge, you might not like this game a whole lot, but if you have younger kids, I could see them really enjoying this game, except for that one costume that requires a bit of thinking. But even that's not too difficult compared to some of the harder puzzles in Ace Attorney and Danganronpa. Now, this game is retailing for $60, and I do think that's a bit steep for a game that's so simple and sometimes has some imprecise platforming. I guess maybe they thought the price could be justified by the production values and that it's a good feel and they just really know how to maximize a crafted look. But I still think if it's possible, maybe wait for it to go down to something like $30. But if you want to support developers that seem like they're passionate about the game, that's your call. Personally, I'm happy that I rented it on GameFly. I don't think I'll ever buy it for myself. I think I'm happy enough that I just rented it. And I'll give it back and say I was very satisfied with the amount of time that I played. It was consistently engaging 100% of the time. And honestly, even the game that I currently rank higher than it can't say that. I hope you won't let the internet tell you that it's directionless and boring and inconsistent, because it's not. It is amazing. So with that, thank you very much for watching. Let me know down in the comments what you think of the video, and if you have any questions, concerns, critiques, etc. Thank you very much to my Patreon supporters Matthew Rakowski, Spoonghost, and Splatcat for their financial contributions. And until the next time, remember to keep the faith, stay epic, and God bless. Bye!
What's that? Thank you very much.